CNN, 18th of March 2024, Putin's 6 more years in office will frighten many nations. Not China, though. Vladimir Putin's inescapable landslide victory in an election devoid of genuine opposition served as a stark reminder to Western leaders of his ironclad grip over Russia's political landscape as his conflict against Ukraine rages on. However, Putin's rejection of a global order led by the West will help other leaders, like Chinese President Xi Jinping, who will applaud his win. According to early figures released by Russia's Central Election Commission on Monday morning, Putin received 87.3% of the vote, with 99.8% of the votes counted. In a phone call that day, Xi congratulated Putin, stating that his re-election fully reflected the support of the Russian people, according to Chinese official media. According to the report, he also promised that China would support the sustained and in-depth growth of the strategic partnership between the two nations. Since the commencement of the Kremlin's war over 2 years ago, Xi has placed a great deal of weight on his connection with Putin. He has strengthened trade, security, and diplomatic ties while refusing to budge from their no-limits cooperation. China has incurred costs for this. Even if it maintains its neutrality, Europe began to question its intentions when it did not denounce the invasion when the US and its allies banded together to criticize Russia. This also revealed Beijing's plans for Taiwan's democratic self-government. The NATO commander, Jens Stoltenberg, stated that Beijing does not share our values and challenges our interests in an annual report on Thursday. The study also highlighted Beijing's growing alignment with Moscow. However, China's approach allowed Xi to focus on more profound objectives. Xi saw Putin as an essential ally in reforming a world unfairly dominated by principles and rules established by Washington and its allies, and in the face of growing tensions with the US. Beijing can also concentrate on other regions of interest, such as Taiwan and the South China Sea, while relations with Moscow are solid. Before the Russian election results, Steve Tsang, director of the SOAS China Institute at the University of London, stated that Xi sees Putin as a genuine strategic partner and that Beijing would be a disappointment if Putin did not win by a wide margin. Xi, the only Chinese leader to have concentrated power within his own country since Mao Zedong, won't be the only world leader to welcome Putin's resumption of power. Kim Jong-un of North Korea recently met Putin on a rare foreign visit in Russia's Far East. According to Washington, the trip was intended to enable Moscow to purchase armaments from Pyongyang. Kim sees this tightening relationship as a significant chance to boost his flagging economy while carrying out further nuclear development despite growing US-South Korean collaboration. The national media reported that Kim of North Korea quickly congratulated Putin on his victory on Monday. A prolongation of the Putin period benefits an embittered Iranian regime that has been increasing its collaboration with Russia and giving it drones and weaponry. Even India has profited from ongoing relations with Russia, mainly through its purchase of cheaper oil, even as it forges closer connections with the US and advocates for peace in Ukraine. Along with supporting peace in Ukraine, several governments in the Global South have sought to strengthen their ties with Russia as a result of the war's adverse economic effects. Different global order. Putin's ability to hold on to power and get to this stage without losing in Ukraine has not been specific, even though the Russian election was a shambles. The Russian president appears to have misjudged how quickly success would come from what his government continues to refer to as a special military operation in Ukraine. He was challenged by the late warlord Yevgeny Prigozhin, who attempted a brief but unsuccessful insurrection, and by Western sanctions that cut off Russia's economy from a large portion of the international market. As a result, Putin has increased persecution and suppressed opposition throughout the nation, even that of Alexei Navalny, the most well-known and charismatic domestic opponent of the Kremlin, who passed away in an Arctic jail last month. Putin now rules over an economy that is surviving sanctions and a battlefield where his opponent has not yet made a significant breakthrough, emerging ready to rule for at least another 6 years. There are early indications of weariness in the meanwhile, especially from the US, where a presidential election in November may reverse US backing for Ukraine. The war might still change a lot. However, Putin's victory guarantees the durability of Russian connections for those nations that have stuck by him or have resisted US-led efforts to isolate him, as well as the growth of a growing coalition of vehicles for non-Western alignment. As its chair this year, Russia is scheduled to host the yearly meeting of the BRICS alliance of big developing nations. At the beginning of this year, the group, which had consisted of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa since 2011, nearly quadrupled in size to include Iran, the United Arab Emirates, Ethiopia, and Egypt. BRICS is viewed as the G7's counterpart among developing nations, and its October summit in Kazan, Russia, is expected to highlight the significant differences in perspectives between the two groups. After Russia invaded Crimea in 2014 and missed the G8 summit in Sochi, the G7 countries expelled Russia from the G8 that year. Putin is viewed differently worldwide than in the West for various reasons, including the emergence of middle powers that oppose US dominance in international affairs, the desire for a global order that doesn't despise authoritarian or repressive regimes, or the simple economic necessity for developing economies. Many of these countries have been further alienated by US support for Israel, particularly in light of the continuous destruction in Gaza, and China's vocal criticism of the treatment of Palestinians has reverberated throughout the global South. For his part, Putin has portrayed the BRICS as a component of an expanding movement surpassing the status quo in many ways, including in the economy. During his State of the Union speech late last month, he declared, "There is no getting away from this objective reality, and it will remain that way no matter what happens next, including even in Ukraine." He then emphasized a point of view that, when he begins his new term, he will probably want friends and foes to take into account. No enduring international order is possible without a strong and sovereign Russia. Alert Beijing. However, this does not mean that nations with ties to Moscow are not closely monitoring the situation in Ukraine. That might apply particularly to China, Russia's most potent strategic ally. With official news agency Xinhua emphasizing Putin's pledge to continue promoting national development and another state media headline hailing Russia's steadily advancing political process, Chinese state media naively reported the election results on Monday. Putin's remarks about China at a news conference on Sunday night were also covered. He emphasized the coinciding of state interests between the two nations and reaffirmed Beijing's claim to Taiwan's self-governing democracy. As long as the conflict doesn't head toward a Russian defeat, China will continue to gain significantly from it. Chinese consumers devoured record amounts of Moscow's crude oil in 2023, and since the invasion, exports of goods to Russia have increased, including vehicles and home gadgets, which has boosted commerce to all-time highs and the value of Chinese yuan-denominated. Xi has exploited the Ukrainian conflict as a springboard to promote his own, if nebulous, alternative framework for international security, while China benefits from the US government's shifting priorities. Beijing, however, claims that to project an image of being a mediator, it is working tirelessly to end the crisis. To encourage a diplomatic settlement to the crisis, it dispatched its special envoy for Eurasia, Li Hui, on 2 trips, the second of which ended last week, to Russia, Ukraine, and other regions of Europe. Renmin University's Wang Yiwei and other Chinese foreign policy experts claim Beijing is worried about the possibility of more European nations being directly involved in the conflict, as well as the possibility of nuclear escalation, a threat that Putin has recently reiterated. Li Hui's concern this time is how to avoid escalating the conflict, he told CNN. However, Li, a former Russian ambassador, and other Chinese officials are perceived in most of Europe as merely outlining a strategy that would ultimately work in Putin's favor. This is consistent with European perceptions of Beijing's position since the beginning of the conflict, when it maintained that all parties' legitimate security concerns needed to be addressed. For the time being, the inevitable outcome of this weekend's Russian election will probably just serve to confirm Beijing's and some other non-Western capitals' belief that they were correct to support Putin, while pressure from all over the world to put an end to the conflict rises.